So welcome aboard. I know there's some folks who couldn't join us tonight, but we will get started with those who are. So welcome aboard as we have this kind of special time together to think a little bit about planned giving and what that might mean for your congregation. What I want to do first is, well, we start with some introductions, and I might have everyone but the two of us presenter types introduce yourself first. So just say your name, your congregation, and then just give a little bit of background, if there is one, around the endowment or foundation that you have. And if you don't have one, that's cool too. So why don't we start it with the First English crew?
Sure.
Who wants to go first?
I'm Jim Yoakum. I'm the treasurer at First English, and we actually have had a foundation for quite a long time, and our president's on the call here. So yeah.
And what is your what are the monies from your foundation go toward?
We've got each end of the year, we do an allocation to the various ones, and it's a mix of some local charities, some emphasis type of programs. Like we kicked off the snack pack program a couple of years ago, and so we've financed part of that. We also have a provision that we offer a scholarship to students that enroll in a Lutheran college.
Okay.
And that is renewable based on their performance, staying in school and staying active. And that, then we also have a one that's a designated a gift from a previous member that had that goes to Wartburg. And then typically right now our fund balance in our foundation is somewhere in the ballpark of $290,000.
Okay.
We've had it going about I think it's either 14 or 15 years that Jim indicated. We've had the foundation for a number of years.
Okay.
Our basic principle or policies that we follow are that we will generally not dip into the actual value of the thing. It's basically income that's used for the generation or support during the year and that. Okay. So it's an area there.
Excellent. All right. Well, yeah, we'll dive into some more pieces here as well, and then Pastor Ryan's with us too. So, and then Dennis, tell us what's the story at Faith in Washington?
It's St. Mark's in Washington.
St. Mark's. I'm sorry. I always get that backwards. I have a good, long story. I have a good friend of mine's at Faith, so I get,
easily confused. We're just up the road from each other. We do have a mission endowment fund that some of the money from that goes for local within the church things. I was just brought up. I'm still coming up to speed with everything after taking over from Carol from last year, so I don't know all the details. There is some local charities that we contribute to. I believe, like they can reach out and apply for funding. Some goes to the Synod and ELCA ministries, and then there's some international and national ones as well, where the money goes. And I believe it's a similar thing where we try to use just the revenue generated by the funds and don't take anything from those funds.
And for both of you, do you know where your money is invested?
Ours is with Trivent.
Okay.
I believe ours is all with a Fidelity account. That some of it is in bonds and some of it is in some other stocks. Okay.
All right. Excellent. Well, I will. Actually, for those who, I will I'll just real quick introduce Tim, but I'll let him kind of do more of his story. So I've invited Tim Ernest from the ELCA Foundation to be with us tonight. As you're going to find out, he is an amazing resource for you, and knows planned giving very well and can be really helpful with you for that. So every time I have a group from any area of the country, I always love to bring in the gift planner, the ELCA gift planner, to kind of make this connection. So Tim, why don't you just tell a little bit about your story?
Sure. Well, thank you, Pete, for having me, for allowing me to spend some time with you tonight, and thank you for the group for listening to what I have to say. And what I'd like to just do is introduce myself. Again, Tim Ernest with the ELC Foundation. I'm the regional gift planner for the 3 synods in Illinois. So Illinois is my territory. I've been at this position for about 5 years. And before that, though, I was a financial advisor. I worked for a company, Fixed Income Capital Partners, where we help and community banks with their portfolio. I was in the banking channel with Bank Financial, where I was in charge of 6 branches. And I also worked for AXA Advisors as a financial advisor. It's a large insurance conglomerate. And so that's basically my background. What I wanted to do is just talk to you a little bit about the ways that I can help a church. Again, there's no cost to what I do to the church. I'm paid a salary by the ELCA Foundation. So what I'd like to do too is to do, one of the things I help with is gift policy. And you might say, Tim, really, do we need a gift policy? We're going to take a look at any gift we get. And that's fine for stock. That's fine for cash gifts. But what happens when someone comes to you and says, you know what, I've got some real estate. I'm working with someone now who's got a farm. Do you take real estate? What about a gift? Do you take a used vehicle? Do you take artwork? Do you take mineral rights? Do you take other things? So sometimes it helps just to broaden the horizon. I know of a woman who said, you know what, I'd like to leave. She left some jewelry. There wasn't a lot of value. The pastor said, you know what? We went out to many places to get a valuation for it. It wasn't worth a whole lot. But what happened is the gift behind that gift, that was just kind of an initial gift. And the gift behind that was 5,000 shares of $80 a share. So, there was a $400,000 gift behind that. And the gift policy might say, well, what do we do when maybe we don't take a gift? Whose job is it to reach out and say, no, thank you. We can't take that airplane you're building in your garage. But if you sell, we'd be glad to have you send us a check for the proceeds, that sort of thing. So, but whose job is it to tell the person maybe no, thank you, if that comes up? The other thing is, one of the things I always encourage when a church gets a gift is celebrate that. They were having coffee and donuts in the narthex after the after the service, just to celebrate this gift that we got. And it's not to make anyone feel bad. It's just to lift up the fact that, we've been blessed by this gift. So I do have gift policy, and I think just sitting down sometimes and thinking through the sort of gifts that the church would accept kind of broadens people's horizons as to the gifts and how we're going to handle the gifts we get.
I can just jump in here. I'm just kind of curious, for each of your congregations, do you have a gift receiving policy at this point? Lee's pondering hard.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to unmute myself. That's an area that we've been looking at right now. It is one that we certainly would appreciate any guidance or suggestions on doing it.
Yeah.
And one of the areas where it's a little bit of confusion is that we've got the First English Lutheran Church Foundation and then First English Lutheran Church. And for funerals and memorials, many times they will just say to a memorial fund or a memorial, and that gets into, does that go into the general budget or does that go into the foundation? And we don't have that well defined, and that's an area that we're trying to wrap our arms around to see if we can get that more clearly delineated. and a process of doing that, because it's a area that we've tried to make people aware of it, but at the time of a death or that's not the best time to talk to them in terms of what are the alternatives and that. And so it's an area that we struggle through it, and there are times that the council gets involved of trying to resolve issues in terms of where we were. The last time we had a major gift, we were right at the end of a capital funding campaign, and we were about ready to go out and secure a $250,000 mortgage. And we had one of the members that had just passed. He had $275,000 that he donated to the church as part of his thing. And so, there it was fairly easy to designate that, go in that direction, and that was very much in line with the wishes of the family.
Okay. Dennis, I know you're just on board. So do you know if there's a gift policy?
I don't know that we have a gift policy, but I know we have a memorial fund that the memorial team, they look after the budget with that. I know, like this, in the past, they've used money for redoing the stained glass windows in the church, and I know they're looking at some signage and other things this year from the memorial fund. But I know that we have some separate funds, but I don't know that we have a specific policy on, like, do we receive anything or everything, or do we say, no, you can't give.
If someone says I have $200 that I want to put it in the organ funds, we can buy a brand new organ. You're like,
yeah. I mean, I don't think we have an organ fund, but
yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting what people want to designate. That's for sure. Yeah, sorry to interrupt there, Tim.
No, that's okay. And it's good to have these discussions because it brings up some ideas. You know what happens when someone leaves a gift, or they want to leave a gift and it's for choir robes? And you know what? The choir doesn't wear robes, haven't worn robes for years. One thing that you might want to have in a gift policy that says, you know what, if you designate a gift, if it's a restricted gift, we reserve the right after 24 months or 36 months or 60 months to repurpose that gift for something we can use. And I can give you an example. My church had money set aside for something that just wasn't going to be used. The pastor finally reached out to the family and said, do you know what, can we use this? And the family said, God bless you. We thought you spent that years ago, by all means use it for, and they sent, a note writing say, you know what, you can use this funds, but for this other purpose, it was needed for another use. But one of the things a gift policy might help you indicate is, why have many gifts for flagpole maintenance when you've got a new flag and plenty of flags? I mean, what do you do? I mean, you don't want to have 50 small accounts at the local bank. So, but a gift policy, I think, can be very useful for a number of reasons. So it is something to think about. It's simply policy. It's not, it's not written constitution, it's not a bylaw, but it gives some general guidance, and it shows people that you've thought about the whole gifting procedure, and you have a strategy or a structure in place. Another thing, and probably more importantly, I'd like to move on to here is I've got a PowerPoint. I'll move through it quickly on endowments, and this is on Fund Day. Well, it was called Fund Day for years, and I'm going to apologize here at the onset, is that it's actually called the Ministry Growth Fund. I'm not going to go real deep into the technical aspects of this investment, but I just want to give you guys kind of a brief overview of the endowment fund. And I think it makes sense. Maybe if you're with Fidelity or if you're with Thrivent now, it might be good just to have somebody in your back pocket. Things don't work out as you had planned, but it might be good just to learn a little bit more about the endowment fund, And what I'd like to do is share my screen here. Let me just see if I can get what I need.
And it's funny, okay, for years it was fund A, but
Yeah.
there was no fund B. It was the
No.
only fund. It's like, that's the best name you could come up with. So they finally got a little bit more creative.
All right. Are you guys able to see this?
No.
Okay, I'll try this again. For some reason, it's not allowing me to share. All right. You know what? Well, I'll just, without the slides, I'll just go over just a very brief history. I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but basically what happened is the ELCA it was founded in 1988, and the same time the foundation founded the endowment fund. It basically began with about 60 million endowment assets and another 15 million in charitable gift annuities. So there was roughly 75 million in this fund. By July of 1999, 11 years later, they've decided that, you know what, we're going to establish a pooled trust fund. What we did there is this fund became a 501c3 in and of its. And then by January of 18, the fund had grown so large that they decided that they were going to separately incorporate. Today, their assets in the fund of just north of 1 billion. So it's a pretty significant fund. Back in 19, about 817 million. Then it went to about 900 million, and now it's just over 1 billion. In that, half of that money is investor accounts. By investor accounts, I mean congregations, synods, Lutheran organizations, and about half of that is endowments that church-wide owns. In other words, it could be named endowments, it could be endowments for World Hunger, Fund for Leaders. So about half the assets belong to the ELCA. The other half are investor accounts. And I think the important takeaway there is we're not saying you should invest in this fund, it would be good for you. It's basically saying invest where we invest. And what's happening there is roughly half the assets belong to church-wide. There are over 1,150 investors. Most of those are congregations, probably 80% or better are congregations. 54 of the 65 synods are in Fund A, and there are other Lutheran organizations, Lutheran camps, seminaries that are invested there as well. When I look at the market breakdown, the synods have a slightly larger piece of the pie than they look to have, just simply by the fact that they tend to have larger accounts. The fund is a commingled fund. By commingled, what I mean is it's a pooled trust. All the money goes into a single fund. When you make a deposit in a fund, you buy units. When you add money, you buy additional units. It's much like shares of a mutual fund. When you sell, you sell units. There are dual investment objectives. I'll get a little bit more into that in a second. One of the keys is its social purpose investments. I mean, we are the church. There are things that we want to invest in and other things that we want to stay away from. The things that we want to invest in are community development. We want to invest in environmentally friendly technologies. Things that we want to stay away from are things like alcohol, tobacco, firearms, private for-profit prisons. We want to stay away from companies that have significant environmental problems. And so we are invested in a socially purpose. The way that works is that Portico, that invests about 80% of the assets, which was the board of pensions for the ELCA for many years, and they're investing between 6 and 7 billion. They also invest 80% of the funds that are in the municipal fund. And I'll talk a little bit more about governance and oversight in a second. Again, pooled assets from multiple investors. What we do by combining that money with money from Portico that they're investing for pension related purposes is that we reach economies of scale. So the key there is, you know what, by pooling these funds with other funds, when we go to people on Wall Street to negotiate a deal, and what we do is negotiate with different groups for each slice of the pie. So in other words, someone might be doing large cap, another group might be doing mid and small cap, other groups are doing, you know, managing the fixed income, that sort of thing. The investment objectives are to generate stable quarterly distribution. One thing that this fund does is we want to pay out quarterly. Now, you don't have to do that. You can elect to reinvest all the distributions. You don't have to take the quarterly distributions, but we do encourage that. We've increased the quarterly distribution for many years now. Show you a little bit about the calculation here later. And then the other thing is we want to preserve the purchasing power of the contributions. So in other words, if it returned roughly 12% last year and it's paying out a quarterly distribution of 4%, the 8% stays in there to grow the fund, helps keep up with inflation. But again, one thing I'd like to talk about here is if the unit value was roughly $1,355 at the beginning of 2020, by the end of 2020, it was $1,455. So we want to grow the unit value. The other thing, though, that we want to do is distribute some of those funds. So basically the distribution in 2020 was $49.60 per unit. And so, and now in 2020, that'll be $51.96. So what we do is we take a look back at the ending value of the fund on December 31st for the last 5 years. We take an average of that and we multiply that by the 4% to figure out distribution rate. Now, most most universities and private foundations are required by the IRS to distribute 5%. But being that we're a church, we can determine our own payout rate, and we're a little bit more conservative. Feel like a 4% rate is what we're content with. Now, there are other churches that say, well, Tim, one thing that we would like to do is we would like to just reinvest everything, see what it's earned at the end of the year, and then just make a one-time withdrawal. That's fine. Or, you know, maybe even several withdrawals. But in any event, you can take that quarterly distribution, but you don't have to. Again, one of the things we're going to do is follow the ELCA corporate social responsibility guidelines. We're going to screen, not divest. Companies not. So let's just say we're not going to say that we don't want to invest in China, but we might see a company. We might, let's say Huawei. We pick out one company that we say, you know what, we're not really comfortable with what they're doing. We are not going to invest in this company, but we're not going to you know, select countries that we're uncomfortable with. We're going to pick it at the individual company level. Again, we're going to concentrate on positive impact investing. And one of the things that the Portico person does is shareholder advocacy, goes to shareholder meetings, groups with other like-minded individuals to vote the proxies in a way that reflects our values. A little bit about our advisors, our investment managers, our Portico, like I said, that was the Board of Pensions for the ELCA. But also our advisors at JP Morgan, Hamilton Lane, Grosvenor, and the custodian is Bank of New York Mellon. The consultant that we use is Greystone Consulting, which is a division of Morgan Stanley. And then the board of trustees and the investment on the board of trustees are also used for oversight. Briefly, the portfolio construction, it's half actively managed roughly and half passively managed. If we have an active manager that can't seem to outperform an index, we're not shy of saying, but let's save some money. Let's use this passive index if it's outperforming these active managers. Another thing I'd like to emphasize is that people will say, Tim, we're interested in Fund A, but we need the money in a couple of years. And one thing I'll say is, you know what, Fund A is a good long-term investment. If your horizon isn't at a minimum of 5 to 10 years or longer, this probably isn't the investment for you. I would suggest the credit ELCA credit union or ELCA mission investment fund. This is a long-term investment. And the reason I say that is I just happen to be looking at a chart right now that shows in 2018, there was a negative return of 7.8%. In 2015, there was a 1.79% negative return. However, in 18, well, if you were in 17, it returned 18. And if you stayed in through 20, 20 returned, it looks like right around 20%. So, but there are highs and lows. You can have a year where there's a negative return and you don't want to get in the year before you have a negative return and then need the funds. The other thing I'd like to mention here just quickly is the distributions from this fund were 59 million from the last year, and over the last 5 years, it's distributed 135 million. But I know you guys can't see that. I'm sorry, I'm not sure. That's a PDF file. Why that wouldn't share? One other thing though that I'd like to go to briefly, if I open it up for questions in a minute, but let me see if it can. Are you guys able to
Yeah, there we
see
go.
this?
Now we're getting.
Okay.
Yep,
There you go.
Okay. Let me just take a look.
And as he's getting this organized, and when I was on the Senate staff here at the Southeastern Minnesota Senate, we had all of our all our endowments and those kind of investments in Fund A, and we just found it to be a great tool because it paid a good quarterly dividend or the quarterly payment, so we were able to use that money from the endowment, so we could budget, and we had some idea every year of this is how much we're going to have to give away. But then the corpus continued to grow, so that just kept expanding, which gave us, as you took your percent the next year, it was even more, so it was just a great tool, invested well, and is. I know some congregations spend their endowment to the foundation team spends a lot of time in investing. We actually strongly recommend against that. That simply put it in a fund like this. And I know there are others that are similar, but where you're not worrying about the investing, because the challenge of that is if things don't go the right way, well then suddenly there's a lot of guilt and shame, and what do we do? Or I've also seen congregations that say, well, we were told we can't lose any value, so we'll just put it in a CD. And and if you do that, you don't have any money to give away because you're making 0.5%. So I think this is a great balance where you don't have to actively work with it. It's in with money with all sorts of other people that we trust, and from there. So.
And you know what I do? I come into churches quite often, and I had a pastor tell me, you know what, Tim, we've got some money in a savings account. I'm thinking about opening an endowment. And I'm like, well, tell me a little more. And the pastor said, well, yeah, about 10 years ago, we were going to build, we were going to extend the church And so we have the money in a savings account, and it's been there for roughly 10 years. It's a pretty substantial amount. And I thought, you know what, the average return over 10 years on Fund A is just a little north of 9%. You know what, the money would have doubled in the that was in that savings account. And so, you know, my thoughts were, well, they didn't know. They thought they were going to build. They kind of took that off the table. But yeah, sometimes I do see that where a lot of times now people are in CDs, and they're safe. And don't get me wrong, they're, you know, with the market as volatile as it is right now. But you know, one of my thoughts are some of the groups that are moving money over are saying, well, Tim, we're going to put in 25,000, and that there is a minimum. The minimum deposit required to start a ministry growth fund account is 25,000. But what they're doing is they said, we're going to move 25,000 this month, and every other month we're going to move 25,000 over till we have, say, 100,000 invested, and then we're going to just kind of take a look at where we're at and reassess things, thinking that eventually they'll probably go to 200,000. But you know, that's really up to the group, and I do that same sort of thing. What happens is I'll come into an endowment committee, and it's really become the investment committee. And I'll say, just like you're saying, Pete, let the professionals handle the investments and concentrate on marketing. Let people know in the congregation the endowment fund. And the other thing is, and one thing I strongly encourage, is the groups that are benefiting from the gifts. You need to have those groups come in and talk to the members of the church and say, you know, God bless you. I had a church that set up an endowment, and there was a church down in Louisiana, and the hood over their grill in their kitchen was out, and they needed a new hood, but they couldn't afford to do it. And they were feeding during COVID, I think 300 or 400 people a week. And so this church that had this endowment said, you know, we'll make a gift. How much roughly? And they made a gift of 3,500. But the people on that endowment committee are telling me, you would have thought we had given this church $100,000. They were so overjoyed that they could, you know, replace this hood over their the grill in their you know, in their kitchen area, so they could continue to feed those people. But it's those stories. If you can get the stories being told, and again, I was at a church in Palatine where they had a young man, and he did it was really a very compelling video, and he told how he was homeless in high school. His parents' home was foreclosed on. He moved to another home with his parents, and that home was foreclosed on. And pretty soon he was living in his car, and he was going to quit his high school learning so he could get a job at a factory or anywhere, just so he could have, you know, money so he could have food to eat. And this endowment committee had given to this local group, Northwest Compass, that comes in and helps families in emergency situations. And they helped this young man. They said, don't quit. We'll find a family, or we'll find a place for you to live. We'll make sure that, you know, you have food. And what happened though is this young man went on to graduate, went to U of I and got a chemical engineering degree. And now he comes back and he tells the story of the church. And it's really you know, many of the members said, you know, we didn't even know he was homeless. We didn't know that his family was going through that sort of difficulty. But it's those stories like that that get people at the church that say, well, you know what, now I see what the endowment is doing, the good it's doing, and it encourages people, of course, to, you know, continue to make gifts. So
and I want to just piggyback on that just real quick, if I could, Tim. And what this really fits in is, as we think about annual giving, or as you think about special appeal, and we've talked a million times, you inform, you motivate, you ask, and you thank, right? You get people excited about it before you ask. And the reality is we do the same thing with planned giving. So I'm curious, from from your congregations, of the last 10 funerals, how many people left a gift to the congregation? Usually the answer is none. Sometimes it's one or two, but the biggest reason that people don't remember the congregation in their estates is no one asked. And as Tim was saying, it's telling those stories. It's telling the impact. As we let people know, $10,000, or $3,000 went to the local food shelf. That's information. But let's tell the stories. Let's get people excited so that we can say, and your planned gift can really help to grow this, so we can do even more. I think a lot of people think of a planned gift, do an endowment as, well, that was the bachelor farmer who didn't have any other family. Well, you can, just because you have family to leave to, I mean, tithing off of your estate, if you have, $1 million estate, just for round numbers, if your kids still get 900,000 and there's 10,000, and 100,000 for this church that you have loved and cared for all your life, why would you not want to consider that? So building in some way of inviting people in, and we could tell, I'm sure Tim could too, we could tell story after story of congregations that, received a whole bunch of endowments, endowment gifts, and it was exciting, and then all of a sudden it stopped, and they're like, well, what happened? Well, what happened was 30 years or 20 years ago, someone encouraged all the people to consider it, and then they left and people stopped talking about it. And then so it dries up. It's the long game. You're not going to get it next week, probably, but it's important. So, okay, back to Tim, because.
And one thing I'd like to talk about is just kind of ways to give. This is just a slide that I use in one of the presentations. So when I'm at a church, I want to talk about, and maybe pose the question, have you remembered the church in your will or at the end of your life? And one of the first things here, a direct bequest, a gift from a will, right? Or, it could be a trust, but a bequest from a will. And I had one of those situations here recently. I have to tell you another quick little story. I met this man. His name was Doug. He couldn't attend the presentation at the church. He was actually in specialized care. He had cancer. And I went to see Doug. We did a gift plan. We got to the end of the plan, and Doug says, Tim, that's fine. That's a beautiful plan. There's only one problem. I said, what's that, Doug? He said, I don't have a will and I don't have a trust. I don't have anything in place. And here was this guy. He had stage 4 cancer. He's very sick. And then COVID hit. I said, oh, Doug, I know some people. You might want to reach out. I'll just give you the names of a few attorneys. And he said, oh, Tim, I've got somebody in mind. But after COVID hit, even the attorney couldn't get in to see this man. And so I had an attorney do everything online, and she put a will together for him. It was, notarized and witnessed, perfectly legal, and Illinois allowed for that during the COVID crisis. And a few months later, Doug passed away. But Doug left everything he had to the churches he had attended. And the point here is, let's say that Doug didn't hear about the presentation and didn't request that I, visit him. The state of Illinois, if they received Doug's estate, wasn't going to say, you know what, Doug was really fond of the churches. I think he intended some money to the churches. The state is going to say, no, that money is ours. There's nobody. And Doug was never married. He had no children. He had no immediate relatives that he knew of. And it was just one of those situations where luckily, I was able to help Doug, and it really made him happy to know that he sort of had control of what happens to what he's accumulated over his life at the end of his life. So direct bequests. I'd like to talk briefly about charitable remainder trust. I'm working with a gentleman right now. He had a 106-acre farm in way. He decided he'd set up several charitable trusts with me before, and he mentioned, I would be willing to consider gifting a farm. Well, a 106-acre farm in Illinois is $1,270,000. It's a very large gift. But again, here's no children, um, pretty well off, setting up charitable remainder trust where that'll pay out for their lifetime to both, 5% rate to both, to the husband, and then if whoever's the remainder. But at the end of that, the amount that's left, and I can tell you, if it pays out 5%, and the investments do 5% or better, that whole 1,270,000 are going to be there at the end. It's a very, very significant gift. And I've set up a couple of these with Farm. One was a $2 million gift, was just over $1 million. One thing that I'll also talk about are charitable gift annuities. Some people say, well, Tim, I am concerned about outliving my assets, or I do have some concerns. I would consider a split gift with 10,000, as little as $10,000. They can charitable gift annuity. They have to be a minimum age of 65. We can start them at 55 to pay out at 65, a deferred annuity. But really, it makes people feel good about, what, I'll get some income, but the remainder is going to go to the charity that I'd like to see. One thing that people may or may not know about is charitable IRA rollovers. Just like required minimum distributions, when you hit a certain age, it used to be 70 and a half. Now it's 72. The IRS is going to make you start taking withdrawals from your IRA if you haven't already. And one thing you can do is you can gift up to 100,000 in a charitable IRA rollover, which is really a qualified charitable distribution. If the money goes straight from the trustee to the charity, to the church, they don't have to add that their adjusted gross income and pay tax on that. Now, they don't get a tax deduction for making the contribution, but no taxes were paid on those funds. Another thing I help with is a donor advised funds. What happened with the Secure Act is that all of a sudden the state deduction is so large that a lot of people, prevents them from itemizing. Well, so what people would like to do is they'd like to if you make a large or relatively large contribution to a donor advised fund, you can get the tax deduction all at once and make the advice, or make the distribution from the donor advice fund over a number of years. So it's basically kind of like bunching your deductions all at once, making a contribution to a donor advised fund, netting it out over a number of years. Beneficiary designation, what happens is sometimes people say, oh, Tim, sounds like I need to meet with an attorney. And I'll say, do you know what? You can call the beneficiary for your IRA or your 401k or your pension and get a change of beneficiary. And you can add, you can add your church. Typically for my retirement, I've added the church for 10%. I've added the ELCA and the church on some life insurance that I have. But very simple way is I have 3 children, and if financial firms, they don't like dealing with like 33 and a third. If I divide that 3 ways for my 3 kids, it's like, oh, well, we're not going to deal with a third of 1%, round it to the next whole percentage or 10%. And I'll say, well, I don't know which child I'm going to give more. Why don't I give each of my children 30%, name my church as a 10% beneficiary, and solve that problem, plus let my kids see how important my church was to me. So named endowments, I just went over church endowments briefly here, but let's say somebody at your church says, I give 2,000 a year. I'd kind of like to endow my giving, because what happens if someone is given for 20 or 30 years and then they stop? What happens when they stop? Well, you know what? There's a funeral, and then that income stream is lost at the church. And what if someone said, well, you know what, I'd like to endow my giving. I give 2,000 a year. Tim, what would it take? And invested in an endowment. And I might say, well, look, if you put 50,000 in Fund A or the Growth Fund in a named memorial endowment in your name or your wife's name, what we can do is it'll pay out that 4%. 4% of that 50,000 is 2,000. That will continue on. And then people will say, well, how long? I'll say in perpetuity, provided the investment, okay, this is going to continue to give to your church for years into the future. And people are excited about that. It's like, oh, instead of my death having a detrimental effect on the church, I can set up a plan. It's almost like an annuity where it'll keep giving church for years into the future. Again, gifts of real estate and other complex assets. People can have a life estate. Maybe they have a house. Maybe they have a cabin that they no longer, maybe the kids don't want the cabin, and they're thinking maybe they should make a gift out of real estate. So we'd be happy to consider helping them with gifts of real estate. When those charitable remainder trusts, what we do is we basically set up a trust. The real estate goes into the trust. We sell the real estate in the trust. That money invested with State Street, and then they pay out for the charitable remainder trust. They pay out for a number of years. It could be 20 years. It could be the life of both of them or either of them, and then the gift becomes the remainder. But we're happy to do gifts of real estate. People may want to stay in their home till a certain point, and after they pass away, the real estate becomes the gift. Again, we can help. Sometimes I get to churches that are like, Tim, we don't have a brokerage account. We're getting a gift of stock. Can you help us? And we'll sell the stock for that church and submit the proceeds less whatever our broker charges. So we're happy to do that. And then again, I help churches with endowments. Some churches have several endowments. Some churches say, Tim, let's endow mission, whether the gift good or not so good. We want to make sure that our charitable distributions are the same, or we're supporting these groups year after year. Others are saying, Tim, we'd like to endow a building maintenance. We've got an older building, it's very large, to set up endowment to help with that. So again, I find myself doing all the talking. I'm gonna exit out of there, and maybe we can have a little bit of more of a discussion here about endowments, about legacy gifts, that sort of thing.
Maybe
I
I'll
would
just
like
do a
to
quick
mention
framing, and then we'll get to the
Yep.
question. So kind of one the big reason I wanted Tim with us here tonight is for all congregations. I know we have several who aren't here tonight. So if you're a congregation who doesn't have an endowment at all, I'd say talk to Tim, because he can help you kind of get the bylaws and kind of get the pieces together set up. If you don't have a gift acceptance policy, talk to Tim. He's got some templates. He can walk with you and help you through that process. If you have an endowment, which you guys do, and you have people interested in giving you the endowment, talk to Tim, because Tim will sit down one-on-one with them and have that conversation. If you want to have a seminar in your church just to get people thinking about endowments, talk to Tim, because that's what he does. I mean, he can come in and do this. And so there's so many levels, and you don't have to remember what all those different types of vehicles are. It's great to know that they're there and know that there's somebody who's there who can kind of walk with people through this, so that we're not just throwing people to the wolves, but as a way of encouraging people to be a part of your endowment. And actually one great way to encourage people to be part of your endowment is, and sometimes I don't know if we did this year, but sometimes on the intent card on the annual appeal, we'll just put a box saying, I have included, First English Lutheran Church, or I have included St. Mark's in my estate or in my planned giving, or I would like to consider it. I'd like more information, and so that's just a way of finding out who's even out there. And it's not a way of saying, okay, well, how much is it and what? No, that's not the point. But when you know that people have done it, then they can share with the congregation and say, this is why I'm considering it. And I see planned gifts as the great equalizer. I don't have to tell you if I've left the church for $50 or $50 million. I just remember the congregation in my estate. We want to make that a normal thing. So that why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you consider that? You know, so it's just a normal piece of the pie. So all right, that's my framing. What thoughts or questions might you have for Tim, or ways that he might be able to help in your context?
Let me tell one more quick story because I just can't get enough stories in. So I'm doing a presentation up at a church, and a woman approaches me after the presentation and she says, you know what? I wish everybody in the congregation would have seen that. And, oh, thank you. God bless you. Those are very kind words. And she said, I tell you what, I'm going to give 100,000 to this congregation. I said, oh, well, God bless you. That's wonderful. She said, no, you don't understand. I'm going to do that this year. And I'm going to do that every year for the next 10 years. So she was giving $1 million to this congregation. And she's by giving she's giving 25,000 a quarter. And then what she said is, you know what, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write in, and she sent me the wording that she sent her attorney, to make the church a 25% beneficiary of her estate, which was 40 to 50 million. So the total gift is going to be 10 to 12 million. I mean, it's transformational for that church. But had we not made the ask or made it easy for this woman to give, you know what? She could have easily given to her alma mater. She's probably being inundated by hospitals saying, would you like to? And so people are constantly being asked. And I think one of the things the church could do a better job of is, hey, let's educate people on how they can give. And let's just make a very smooth path for those people who are thinking about, making. So, I mean, that was an enormous gift. But the point is, I think it's important to do the presentation and just say, you know what, have you remembered the church, or have you thought about a gift to the church? It's kind of a very kind way of, at least opening that conversation.
So questions or how might Tim be an asset to you at this point?
So
I think I am still getting up to speed on everything, and so I really don't know.
Yeah.
Information to absorb in that as I learn more, there may be things that come up where I'm like, oh, we can do something.
Well, and what I'll do when I send out the recording of this to the whole group, I'll make sure that all of Tim's contact information is there, so you can, if something does come up, and eventually it will, that you know who you can talk to. Because the cost to your congregation for Tim's work is nothing.
Nothing. And again, I'm the one that's making a very slight ask, have you thought about the church, or here are ways you can leave a gift, and it gets people thinking. And I think, again, the planned gift, the legacy presentation, some people are going to approach you, they're going to be excited. Others, you may have to reach out to them several times, but when these gifts come, they tend to be much larger, the stewardship type of thing that they were gifting. And I know Bishop Roth told me a story that, Tim, we had two women in our congregation, neither of them were married. I think one washed dishes and the other waited tables, and the one left $370,000 to the church, and the other received half of her sister's estate, and she didn't know what she was going to do, and left somewhere near 700,000. But you would have never known that just by seeing how they lived and that sort of thing. So I think it's really important to try to cultivate planned gifts. I know one other idea is something that you might want to consider is you might want to have like a financial advisor, the pastor talk about end of life, have an attorney talk about wills and trusts, have me in talking about planned giving. And that way it's not just another person with their hand out. It's like, you know what, we're the church and we're here to look out for you. And maybe you have somebody from a funeral home talk about the cost options, that sort of thing. And so what you're doing is you're just providing a holistic approach to the well-being. And I did several presentations on ending life well. It's better to have a plan. Like that story I told you about Doug. Doug's problem was there was no plan. He had no plan. At the end of his life, he was very sick without any sort of plan at all. And again, I'm not there to suggest that they not leave assets to their children. It's no, you need to do that, but just have a plan. Think through what you want to have happen. So again, I find myself doing all the talking here, but I am here to help at no cost. Keep me in mind for helping with gift policy, helping with endowments. I can be a second option, a backup. Think about, or I can help create a new one. Think about legacy presentation. Can do them via Zoom. I'm happy now at this point to meet people in person. And if I get people who are interested, or a pastor says, hey Tim, someone would like to meet with, I'm happy to come down there several times and make visits and trips and just to sit with them and help gift plan. So
I think in many churches, and this is a piece that we're not intentional about, that we love when gifts come, but there's really no plan for inviting or encouraging them. It just, if they come, they come. And when you have a clear gift policy, then people know what you're going to do with the gift. I mean, we've all known the church that fought over the $1 million gift, and people say, well, why would I leave that kind of gift to a church? They don't know what to do with it. But if you have a gift policy, then you have clarity of, nope, this is what we're going to do with it. And then we can, as we invite them to consider, it can really, I think it can really be a huge game changer. Because some people who don't, even some people who have limited assets throughout their life to give, sometimes have more in death than they do in life. But it's a way to still to let their assets make a difference in the world, even after they're gone. So it's just a fabulous thing to kind of keep in front of us. And what we love to see is the endowment team, really one of their big roles, and instead of spending all their time investing, let's spend the time encouraging new people to be a part of it. So it's just, again, it's a different framing, because I think a lot of times the endowment team sees themselves as the givers away of, which is good, because you're gifting money, but also to have somebody thinking about, but how are we encouraging? How are we telling the story? How are we doing all those things? So, which fits in the flow of all the other pieces we've done. And this is if you remember way back to our first time, this is the three-legged stool: that annual fund, capital appeals, endowment. And endowments, and some people give cash gives to endowment, but we think of them, and I'm sure you probably do too, Tim, that generally that's a planned giving vehicle. Not always, but generally that's how those grow.
And I think, and one other advantage is there are some people that want to give to the church, but they say to themselves, well, you know what? I'm afraid they're going to spend it all. It's like, well, that's what you usually do when someone gives you, but they'd say, well, if they spend it, over time, or if they made it last a little longer, and that's kind of what the endowment is. It can stretch out that giving over a period of time. Now some people are like, no, I don't want it in an endowment. I want it, I'm going to send it to the church wherever they need it. They can use it. So there can be a dichotomy there.
Excellent. Well, we said we'd be at about an hour, and we're right about there. So any last thoughts or questions before we go? Like I said, for all of these things, talk to Tim. I mean, we at GSB have people that do planned giving, but in most cases, we say it actually makes, it's in your best interest. Talk to Tim. he's got this covered for you. He does great work. And we fully support that. So it's good for you. It's good for him. It's good for the LCA. Excellent. Well,
Good.
oh,
Thank you, Pete.
yeah. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Good to see you. We'll get this video out. And like I said, I'll get you, make sure you have Tim's contact information when I send that tomorrow.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
You bet. Have a great night, everyone.